So when your guest is a former policeman with more than 20 years on the Phoenix PD, gotta walk a little carefully, don't you, huh? Well, as long as I've had Paul Penzone as a friend, now a security consultant, having retired from the Phoenix PD, it's still tough for me to ask you this question. Have you ever known a bad cop?
Absolutely.
What's it like?
Well, it's a difficult circumstance, and I say that I didn't say it with such confidence as if it's a common thing, but I don't know that you can work in any environment around thousands of people who are human and make mistakes or have instincts that you may not agree with. But it's difficult because so much of law enforcement falls into this gray area. You're dealing with circumstances, trying to find solutions, and oftentimes they can be violent in nature, and you are judging someone else's judgment or their perception of a circumstance, and that could be a defining characteristic as to why you believe them to be bad or not hold the level of integrity that you believe suits the position.
And I think everybody with common sense would acknowledge that there's a disproportionate number of temptations that face anybody in law enforcement. You're around large quantities of drugs, large quantities of money, people who want to give you large quantities of things. But can anything, any temptation, justify the violence in Albuquerque a couple of weeks ago with the Albuquerque Police Department?
It's difficult for me to stand as judge and jury, but what I saw in the one particular incident that I saw...
You saw the videotape.
Correct. Tactically, I thought that it was handled poorly. I think that the planning that went into how they wanted to go about those circumstances, that maybe they were predisposed to a certain outcome, as opposed to thinking, how do we, in the most safe and effective manner possible, take this man out of this setting? And what do we have at our disposal to do that, as opposed to a tactical effort where you think about the levels of force and how to apply those.
Yeah, but tell everybody who that man was.
Sure, he was a 70-year-old homeless man with a mental illness that was basically what you could define as squatting. He was living in he was camping in an area that was probably a preserve, and they were asked to remove him from there. But knowing that he had at least some mental illness, that his perception of circumstances would be far different than theirs, knowing the dynamics of the geography and all those other factors, it makes things complicated, but also gives you more control over the environment because no one else is at risk. It's just you and him, and you control your own behaviors, although you don't control his.
They had non-lethal means to take care of the problem. They had a dog. There were a number of policemen. He's a 70-plus-year-old homeless man. Oh, wait a minute. He had a Swiss Army knife, and so they shot him to death.
Yeah, and I think the problem often occurs that law enforcement by nature is a situation where you take ground and you hold ground. Every situation that you're in, you are very seldom giving up space. You're taking it and you're trying to contain a threat. And there are times when maybe I don't want to call it a retreat, but that you can back out of a situation yet still manage and control it as you reassess what needs to be done. But as I looked at that, that's not the sense that I got. But I just want to speak on this for a moment. Law enforcement is, there's a high percentage of the time that you spend that is violent in nature. It could only occur once or twice during a shift, but make no mistake about it, almost every shift you will encounter someone where you have to be physically aggressive to overcome a threat.
But isn't Albuquerque out of control? 22 deaths at the hands of law enforcement, and acknowledging the fact that maybe a majority of those were justified. But 22 people, they lead the nation, and it's Albuquerque.
No, percentage-wise, it's very concerning. But the reason I was making that point earlier wasn't to justify it. It was to more so recognize that law enforcement sometimes needs to take a step back and reassess and slow down, because I think it can become a culture. I think that when you see this progression of violence that happens more often, you become more comfortable with the violence. And instead of it being your last option, it becomes the first option.
After 21 years in the Phoenix PD, if you knew that something was going on that you objected to on moral and ethical grounds, were you ever told to shut your mouth?
No, never told to shut your mouth, but you were already dealing...
The code of silence isn't there?
Well, the code of silence is almost unspoken if you want to use that as a philosophy. It doesn't need to be stated, because every day you go, some would describe as to battle. You go out there and you deal with bad people, and those that you count on for your safety are the men and women in the same uniform as you. So you have this bond, this camaraderie, these other elements that come into play that may be influential on a human nature level. So to breach that, it has to be something that you really feel the utmost confidence that what occurred is not only unacceptable but unethical and possibly even illegal. Therefore, I need to speak out against it, because if it's something that is in that gray area where you may not have agreed with how it was handled, but to judge it or say that person was wrong is a pretty big next step, you're probably going to step back and you may not want to be around that person. You'll look for reasons to go to other calls without being around them because you don't like the way they handle business, but to actually accuse them of something is very difficult.
Yes or no? Do you think that Phoenix is an outstanding police force?
Yes.
This is Pat McMahon. That's Paul Penzone. This is What's It Like?